Good morning. The Holly and the Ivy by our special guest musician today, Holly Kelchner, appropriately named after the Holly, and our pianist-in-residence, Allison Halerz. For those who don't know, that in ancient Europe, in Roman and Celtic cultures, the holly was a plant of great symbolic importance because it was hardy. It could survive long, cold winters, and because of that, some believe that the plant had maybe medicinal or special properties to it, and so that's why a lot of our seasonal songs honor the holly plant. As we continue gathering this morning, I want to share with you the words of Susan Cooper, this week in which on Tuesday we honor the winter solstice, this piece entitled "The Shortest Day." The shortest day came, and the year died. And everywhere down the centuries of the slow, snow-laden world came people singing and dancing to drive the night away. They lit candles in the winter trees. They hung their homes with evergreen. They burned beseeching fires all night long to keep the year alive. And when the New Year's sunshine blazed awake, they shouted, reveling. Through all the frosty ages, you can hear them echoing behind us. Listen. All the long echoes sing with the same delight, this shortest day, as promise wakens in the sleeping land. They carol, feast, give thanks, and dearly love their friends, hoping for peace. And so do we, here and now, this year and every year. Welcome, Yule. And welcome to each of you to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor. I'm the Reverend Manish, Mishra-Marzetti, serving here as senior minister. Beside me in our chancel this morning are the Reverend Theresa Rohlck, our Congregational Chaplain and Director of the Chalice Bells, Carter Smith, our Acting Director of Music Ministries. I've introduced Allison Halerz, our Pianist-in-Residence, and Mike Halerz serves as our community's technological consultant. And we have Holly Kelchner, a member of our Chalice Singers and our guest flautist this morning. We're so delighted to be together with you in community. Our community, a progressive voice for spirituality, ethics, religion, meeting continuously here in the city of Ann Arbor since 1865, bringing alive the hope of this season, which is that spark of love and community, companionship and friendship that we all recognize we need and that we seek to bring alive together with and for one another. It's in that spirit that we gather this morning, and I'd like to extend a special welcome to anyone joining us for the first time. Now, if you're here with us in person in our sanctuary, immediately following the conclusion of today's service, as you exit those double doors, we have a room to the right called Jackson Chapel, and there will be members of either the staff or our lay leadership who will be available to meet with you there and answer any questions you might have. If you're live streaming this morning, first a warm welcome to all of you who might be live streaming, and a special welcome for newcomers. If you are open to introducing yourself in the live stream chat, please do so, and our chat host, and I'm sure others there as well, would be delighted to greet you in our live stream chat. If you're watching today's service on demand, following your viewing, you can reach out to our coordinator of welcoming ministries, Hannah Hotchkiss, at Hannah, H-A-N-N-A-H, at UUAA.org. Hannah would be delighted to connect with you more personally and give you an orientation to our community. This Sunday, we honor the theme of solstice and the longest winter's night. We'll be moving more deeply into that theme as our service continues and unfolds. Later in this week, we will have our community's annual Christmas Eve services, and I'd like to offer a word related to the logistics and practicalities of that as we look forward to that. Our typical service timings on Christmas Eve are 4:30, 7 p.m., and 9 p.m., and those will be Eastern, and those will be our timings again this year. We will be making those services available in person here in our sanctuary, as well as live streamed as they are happening and on demand afterwards. We would encourage you to think through, and I offer, as one of our community's spiritual leaders, I would invite each of you to think through what your individual and family health needs and circumstances are. That is unique and different from person to person and family to family. So it's not the type of thing where I can tell you what you should be doing. It's a question of discernment and reflection at an individual and family level, particularly as we're all actively trying to learn and adjust in the wake of the Omicron variant of the coronavirus. There's a difference between wanting zero or close to zero risk in the current pandemic time we're in, and wanting to mitigate risk in ways that are practical and reasonable. The two things are not the same, and the two needs may require very different approaches. We have individuals in our community who, for a variety of individual health or personal circumstances, need as close to zero risk or zero risk, if possible and practical. Please plan and behave accordingly if those are your family's needs or individual needs. On the side of mitigation, of taking reasonable precautions, the same precautions that we have been thoroughly implementing every Sunday will continue in place in the sanctuary. So that includes a 50% maximum capacity, 50% versus what we had allowed in the sanctuary pre-pandemic. That capacity limit will remain in place. Now, for any of you who've been attending in person this fall, you know that we've been nowhere near even the 50% of our typical maximum capacity. It's been something much less than that. We, your leadership, we're thinking that Christmas Eve will probably be similar-ish, but there's no crystal ball to perfectly predict that. If we wind up in person being close to that 50% capacity, we will open up overflow rooms in which it'll be possible to view the service in other parts of the sanctuary while still maintaining reasonable distance between seating here inside the sanctuary. So if you are planning on coming in person, please, you might want to show up a little bit early to make sure that you're able to be in this main area. And if you decide that not being in person is what suits you and your family best, there will be live streaming and on-demand options following, both on Christmas Eve and following Christmas Eve. I also want to just offer a word of thanks to all of our community members who so generously donated. If you're able to see, the chancel is decorated with poinsettias that are donated in honor of loved ones. And in this season of love, what a beautiful thing to have that love tangibly expressed and brought alive on our chancel this morning. We thank all those who so generously donated. Now I invite us to continue moving more deeply into this time together of ingathering, of community, of shared reflection as we move more deeply into the theme of the winter solstice and the longest winter night.
Good morning. It's still morning, yes. One of the things we do as a community to mark the beginnings of gatherings is light a chalice. And this morning I have invited Connie Frederick to come up and help us with that. I love the image that you use across the country are all lighting chalices within a few hour time span, and we are one of those. If you are at home and have a chalice nearby and would like to light that with us, please do. Otherwise, you can kindle that spirit in your heart as well. So while Connie lights the chalice, if you would join me in the words, "We light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace." Thank you, Connie. Another thing we do every Sunday that we gather is to speak with intention our words of covenant that reminds us of how we are in relationship with each other. As a group, we don't profess to one single creed or belief, but we are connected by covenant. So if you would join me in the words of our covenant. The spirit of this church is love, and service is its law. This is our covenant with each other, to gather in peace, to search for truth in love, and to help one another. So today, we have a story that's called Sulwe. It's written by Lupita Nyong'o and illustrated by Vashti Harrison. Sulwe was born the color of midnight. She looked nothing like her family, not even a little, not even at all. Mama was the color of dawn, Baba the color of dusk, and Midge, her sister, was the color of high noon. Hardly anyone at school looked like Sulwe either. People gave her sister, Midge, pet names like Sunshine, Ray, and Beauty. People gave Sulwe names like Blackie and Darky and Night. Sulwe felt hurt every time. So she hid away while her sister made lots of friends. Sulwe dreamed of being the same color as her sister. She wanted real friends, too. So she got the biggest eraser she could find and tried to rub off a layer or two of her darkness. That hurt. She crept into Mama's room and helped herself to her makeup. Oh no, she would hear about this from Mama. Sulwe decided to work from the inside out and ate only the lightest, brightest foods. With a stomach ache, she went to bed early and turned to God for a miracle. Dear Lord, why do I look like midnight when my mother looks like dawn? Please make me as fair as the parents I'm from. I want to be beautiful, not just to pretend. I want to have daylight. I want to have friends. If you hear me, my Lord, and would like to comply, may I wake up as bright as the sun in the sky. Amen. When Mama came in to wake her for school the next morning, Sulwe rose to find not a trace of daylight in her midnight skin. Sulwe told Mama everything. Mama asked, "What is your name?" "Sulwe," she muttered. "And what does it mean?" "Star," Sulwe whispered. Brightness is not in your skin, my love. Brightness is just who you are. As for beauty, Mama said, rubbing Sulwe's stomach the way she always did to comfort her, you are beautiful. Sulwe sighed. Well, you are beautiful to me, but you can't rely on what you look like to make you feel beautiful, my sweet. Real beauty comes from your mind and your heart. It begins with how you see yourself, not how others see you. Now, up you get and out you go. How could she, as dark as she was, have brightness in her? How could she have beauty when no one but her mother seemed to see it? How could she be a star? That night, a shooting star appeared at Sulwe's window. "The night sent me," the star said. "Come with me." Sulwe hopped onto the star, and off they went. "Long ago, at the beginning of time," said the star, "there was night and day, and they were sisters. They loved each other very much. But people didn't treat the sisters the same. People gave Day pet names like Lovely and Nice and Pretty. People gave Night names like Scary, Bad, Ugly. She felt hurt every time. Well, Night got fed up and walked right off the earth. Day stayed behind and enjoyed making everybody happy in the sun. But then, Day grew too long. Day began to really miss her sister. So did everybody else. There had to be a way to get her back. Day set off to find Night. And she did. "I miss you," said Day. "I miss you too," said Night. "But you don't know But you don't know what it's like to be treated badly for being dark." "You're right, I don't," Day replied. "But what I do know is that we need you just the way you are. Come and see." Night returned, and the people rejoiced. "We need the darkest night to get the deepest rest. We need you so that we can grow and dream and keep our secrets to ourselves." The stars chimed in. "Brightness isn't just for daylight. Light comes in all colors, and some light can only be seen in the dark." While day had a golden glow, with night everything had a silver sheen, elegant and fine. Day told her sister, "When you are darkest is when you are most beautiful. It's when you are most you." Could it be that night did not need to change even a little? Not even at all? Now that Night and Day were back together, a little bit of night returned to Day in the form of shadows, and a little bit of day returned to night in the form of moonlight. They were inseparable from that moment on and promised to celebrate the brightness in each other, whether people chose to see it or not. "You see," the star explained, "we need them both on their sunniest day and their darkest night, and every shade in between. Together, they make the world we know, light and dark, strong and beautiful." Sulwe rose the next morning, beaming. There would be no hiding anymore. She belonged out in the world, dark and beautiful, bright and strong. And if she ever needed a reminder of her brightness, she could look up at the sky on the darkest night to see for herself. Sulwe felt beautiful, inside and out. The end.
Good morning. As our calendar year is one day closer to turning over to 2022, that means you only have a few more days left to turn in your pledge to support the Building Our Vision pledge drive that we began in late September. I would invite each of you, especially if you have never pledged before, or if you have not yet turned your pledge in this year, to consider entering into our pledging process, which goes towards supporting the services, staffing, and programming that we can offer in the year ahead. In addition, today our offering goes towards supporting the programs and ministries of this congregation. If you would like to give to sustain the work of this community, you can text UUAA to 73256 and select weekly offering. You can also visit uuaa.org/giving or place your offering in the basket on the way out. However you are able to give, thank you so much for your generosity today. And now, as we move into our time of offering, I would invite you to turn your attention to the screens here on the chancel. There you will see the names of donations and dedication for the poinsettias that are decorating our chancel here this morning. Thank you. Now I invite you to rise in body or mind as we join together in dedicating our offering. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Thank you.
As we continue deepening our time together this morning, our meditation today will be a music-based meditation. What that means is you'll hear a round that will deepen and lead us into some silence, some shared silence, and from there emerge back into the round again. As that happens, will soon happen, I invite you to settle into your physical bodies. If it makes sense and feels comfortable, you can close your eyes as we share this time together. Allow the music to guide you and lead you. Feel its energy, almost like a spiral, guiding you into deeper grounds of being in your own physicality, in your own body. If appropriate, let the themes of today's service rest with you in that deeper space. The themes of winter, the themes of the solstice and the longest winter night. Let us now enter into that shared meditation together.
Be still and know that day and night. Be still and know that dark and light are one. Holy circle. Be still and know that day and night. Be still and know that dark and light are one. Holy circle. Be still and know that day and night. Be still and know that day and night are one. Holy circle. Be still and know that day and night. Be still and know that day and night are Holy circle. Be still and know that day and night. Be still and know that day and night are dark and light are one. Holy circle. Be still and know that day and night. Be still and know that day and night. Be still and know that dark and light are one. Be still and know that day and night. Be still and know that dark and light are one. Holy circle. Be still and know that day and night. Be still and know that dark and light are one. Holy circle. Be still and know that day and night. Be still and know that dark and light are one. Holy circle. Be still and know that day and night. Be still and know that dark and light are one. Holy circle.
Be still in knowing day and night. What does that movement into the night, the longest night of our year coming up this week, what does that look and at times feel like? This is something that's been captured in traditions and cultures around the world in a variety of ways, at times intentionally recreated to lead us into the inward experience that we associate with night, the inward gaze. About 15 years ago, I had my first encounter with an indigenous North American tradition known as Inipi in the Lakota culture, sweat lodge in English. And this was a ceremony, a beautiful ancient ceremony led by practitioners in that tradition, people grounded authentically in that tradition. What an honor, what a privilege to be able to do that, participate in a ceremony in that way. And the imagery of that ceremony is very intentionally that of a darkened womb, of going into an intentional space where there's an absence of light for the purposes of healing, for the purposes of growth, symbolically even rebirth. As I engaged in this first ever experience, you go into a relatively small confined space. By the way, this is a tradition that our youth have participated in on our land pre-pandemic. Our coming-of-age youth have traditionally participated in an inipi, in a sweat lodge on our own land. You go into a dark enclosed space. Usually it's shoulder to shoulder, so pretty tight spacing in there. Then, stones that have been superheated, usually for an entire afternoon, they are brought in to create what becomes the sweat lodge. a flap on the inipi is closed, putting everybody in total darkness and absence of light. And then the heat begins as the ceremony deepens. Now, I've never had any experience like this before. I have no reference points for anything like this. And in my feeling of somewhat claustrophobia, being cramped, and then the temperature is amping up, I decide to open my eyes in this very cramped, darkened space. And all I can see, predictably, are glowing red stones, coals in the middle of a fire pit that we're seated around. Now, without any willful control, where my brain automatically goes is to an image of like a grill with red hot charcoals on it, and I'm somehow in some kind of grill experience. Or it jumped from that then to the landscapes of mythology and Dante, hellacious landscapes where sparks of red are flying and off of stone, and that's the only thing you have around you. What I experienced was complete unbridled fear. So much so that in the midst of feeling panic, in addition to the fear, I had to ask to leave the ceremony, to leave it early. Now take a look at what was happening in those moments, right? I'm not in control. This is a ceremony led by other people, by elders, leaders, grounded in that tradition, not me. So I'm not in control of what's actually happening, the circumstances. There's profound uncertainty. This is a completely novel situation. I have never experienced this set of circumstances before. There's high levels of discomfort. And then add to that the symbolic imagery I was getting, the possibility, now possibility is different from reality, but the possibility of danger. Lack of control, uncertainty, discomfort, possibility of danger. Heck, fear is the predictable response. It's actually probably the healthy human response to have in the middle of that combination of circumstances, but the intensity of what I felt, so strong, so strong. Now, I'm hoping you all are piecing together that the type of experience I'm describing, the type of experience, it's not just about me 15 years ago, right? What have we all been going through already together? Even right now, as we try to figure out what Omicron means to each of us, I'm not going to even ask you how many of you have been reading about Omicron voraciously, trying to figure out, are vaccines enough? Are they not enough? And what level of sickness is going to ensue if the vaccines are not enough? I know. I've been reading about all this. I'm sure many of you have too. A continuation of the 2 years that we've already navigated, feeling loss of control, lack of control, uncertainty in the midst of this novel experience, a novel virus, the discomfort, the possibility of danger. We can add to that the very, very, very visible, demonstrable, ongoing impacts of environmental devastation. The past couple of weeks alone, tornadoes this late in December in the Midwest, the frequency and intensity of which meteorologists say is unheard of. Not far from us, right? And even in our localish area, our summer of being drenched and inundated and flooded with trees and branches falling everywhere, cutting power lines, that too, unheard of, not typical for our region, right? Environmental devastation and changes, bringing about the same types of feelings, uncertainty, lack of control, the possibility of danger. We can add to the list the animosity, heck, not even animosity, at times it's just outright hatred that the citizens and residents of our nation feel about one another. The ways in which we talk about one another and otherize one another, at times just outright hate one another, reminding us of our lack of control, the uncertainty we live in, the possibility of danger around us. Here's the thing I've been learning about fear. It's not a popular emotion. We don't like being afraid. Nobody does, I don't. We don't like being afraid. But not only do we not like being afraid, we get scared when fear shows up. It's kind of ironic, but we're afraid of being afraid. Do you track me? Do you follow me? We're afraid of being afraid. And then we get embarrassed or ashamed about it too. Why? Because if we say it out loud, all the things I just mentioned, the natural human response is to be afraid of these sets of circumstances that I just mentioned. It is natural. And yet if we say it out loud, you might judge me. Or maybe you might worry that I might judge you. Why? Because we're supposed to be adults who are skillful, who engage in spiritual practices, practices of grounding. We're supposed to be competent. We're supposed to be mature, model strength for our loved ones, maybe our children or grandchildren, other little ones in our lives. And yet the human thing to do is to just be honest, first off with ourselves. Believe me, societally we would do a lot better if we could be honest with being honest, we could authentically be honest with ourselves about our own fears and anxieties. But that's the starting point. If we can't even be honest with ourselves, how can we share it with anybody else? Yeah, I'm feeling really anxious right now. I'm really afraid right now. How can we ever get to even saying that out loud if we can't admit to ourselves that the circumstances we find ourselves in are fear-provoking? So what do we do in being afraid of fear, being afraid of being afraid? We run from it, which is what I did. I ran out of that inipi. Now, it was more graceful than that. I didn't go screaming. I asked for permission to politely and appropriately leave. But I ran. I did run. Then we'll suppress it. We'll deny it. It's not really there. Oh yeah, I know, yeah. Things are really complicated right now. It's a challenging time. I'm not afraid. Yeah, life has always been challenging. Every decade, every generation has had big challenges. I'll deny my fear that I'm afraid. I'll bypass it, try to go around it. It was over there. I'm over here now. It was already over there. Inipi Take 2, Part 2, Sweat Lodge Part 2. Now, nobody coached me on this. This was some years later. I honestly thought I would probably never participate in this kind of ceremony again. The first experience was so overwhelming, but I was moving in spiritual circles where this was an integral and often visited ceremony, practice in the communities in which I was spiritually learning and growing. So a few years later, the opportunity came up again with a lot of trepidation. This time I was at least a bit more honest with myself that, yeah, this is really a freak me out kind of situation. But I went into it. I pushed myself to kind of try to engage in the ceremony again. And nobody really had any words of wisdom to say about my first time around other than, yeah, you should notice that. You got really scared. Maybe you should notice that. Also notice where else fear comes up in your life. Do you run away from it often? Just notice these things. So the second time around, with that minimal level of guidance, I go back in and I have the same, I am as terrified as I probably was the first time around. And yet something organically happens, something shifts a little bit. I develop an image. I develop a face and a picture for my fear. Now, some of you know I'm a huge science fiction fan, so if you know the Star Wars franchise, this name will be familiar to you. But it's one of the villains, one of the Sith, who's called Darth Maul. Darth Maul has a bright red face and spikes in his head, super scary. And as I'm terrified, Darth Maul's image comes to my mind. And I'm like, all right, yeah, scary villains here. Guess I'll just notice that. I did not try to change the fact that fear was coming up. You can't. I didn't try to analyze it. Cognitively analyzing fear doesn't really work, not in the moment when you're feeling it. I decided just to try and be present to it, to this image, this very scary villain image. And as I did, as I tried to just be present to my own fear, it relaxed, ever so imperceptibly, but in a real way. Here's another verity, another truth about fear. When we suppress it, deny it, try to go around it, pretend it's not there, convince ourselves that we're in a different place and the fear is over there, it amplifies. Not only does it not disappear or go away, it intensifies. And doing the exact opposite of denying it, hiding from it, running away from it, suppressing it, just being present to it, softens it in some way. Almost like a little child that wants to be acknowledged, that it's there, it exists, it's real. It's softened. It's softened, and it's softened just enough that I could be truthful with myself that, yeah, I'm scared. And there's more than the fear. Yeah, I'm terrified. And look, here's also trust. I'm with highly experienced ceremony leaders who've been leading this specific ceremony for decades. And I love them, and I trust them. I trust them with my life. Trust was also there. Lived experience was also there. Many of my friends have participated in this very same ceremony and been just fine. There's lots of data points that life will go on and I'll be okay. I did not try to change the fear. I did not try to ignore it or deny it. I did not try to analyze it. I acknowledged it fully and honestly. And as soon as I did that, other things could open up. I could see the broader picture. I could hold other things side by side with equal weight because all of that was present at the same time. It wasn't just one thing or the other. All of that was there at the same time. So I ask you, I want to invite a question. This is a real question. Take 10, 20 seconds. What are you afraid of now, today? In your personal life, about societal circumstances. Take a few seconds, see what you come up with. Now, invariably, because this happens, I do this too. Some of us will have thought, and I think this too sometimes, yeah, I'm not really afraid of anything right now. We also like to fib to ourselves. Here's how I know that it's a fib. If you've studied evolutionary biology, you know that we are primed, our cognition, the way we are wired to think, we are primed to notice things in our environment that we don't like or that don't sit well with us. It's a survival instinct. It's connected to centuries, millennia ago, where noticing things being out of place or not sitting well were signs of danger that we might experience bodily harm. This hard wiring for noticing problems has helped make us the dominant species on planet Earth, so it's served us well. We no longer go through day-to-day life constantly surrounded by the imminent threat of physical death. But the cognitive psychological wiring is still there. It manifests differently, but it's just as strong. And so if we're hardwired to notice problems, which we are, and we all do it, the noticing of problems / danger, potential danger, evokes fear. It evokes anxiety. So most of us are navigating strong currents of anxiety, worry, fear, the variations and degrees thereof, on a routine and regular basis. And it's one of the things we least talk about and even acknowledge to ourselves. And yet it's so human. It's so human. So very, very human. We are primed to notice problems. And the noticing of these things that sit out of joint, that we don't like, provoke our fear. Now, if we can actually just bring ourselves to be honest and authentic about that, be present to it, here's the beautiful thing. Just as my own fear softened and allowed me to expand the table, what was in front of me, maybe in the night, in the experience of night, as we expand our own individual tables from a place of honesty with ourselves, we might remember and notice that there's never a complete absence of light on our planet. The moon reflects the sun. Even in the midst of the solstice, the stars from our galaxy and galaxies beyond shine in our night sky, reminding us of light and warmth in other places. There are flowers that bloom only in the middle of the night. Algae that glows with luminescence. There is so much beauty and joy and possibility if we allow ourselves to be fully present to what can exist in the midst of night. As we close our time today, I want to share with you a prayer, a blessing from a Methodist minister named Jan Richardson. It's called A Blessing for the Longest Night for the Solstice. She writes, "All throughout these months, as the shadows have lengthened, this blessing has been gathering itself, making ready, preparing for this night. This blessing has practiced walking in the dark, traveling with its eyes closed, feeling its way by memory, by touch, by the pull of the moon, even as the moon wanes. So believe me when I tell you, this blessing will reach you even if you have not light enough to read it. It will find you even when you cannot see it coming. You will know the moment of its arriving by your release of the breath that you have been holding for so long. A loosening of the clenching in your hands, of the clutch around your heart. A thinning of the darkness that has drawn itself around you. This blessing does not mean to take the night away, but it knows the night's hidden roads. It knows the resting spots along the path. It knows what it means to travel in the company of a friend. So when this blessing comes, take up its hand, get up, set out on the road that you cannot see. This is the night when you can trust that any direction you go in, you will be walking towards the dawn. In that spirit, I remind us to return to that image of the holly, that beautiful plant that perseveres, that finds the strength and fortitude to survive the long winter, the plant that reminds us that the light will return. Let us join now as we close our time together in singing Deck the Halls. Well, we're not singing it, we're going to view it. Let us view it, our choir singing it. Would you now rise as you're comfortably able? Before we depart, take a look around this sanctuary. Take a look who's here, your siblings in community. Wave at them. Say hi. Hi to all those streaming online and watching on demand. Feel this community's love and warmth, for it is real. Even as we move into a week in which we will experience our calendar year's longest night, the light of love, the warmth of love, the companionship that we need exists and surrounds us. We are a part of it. There is no fear strong enough to keep us from that or us from that calling. Remember that always. Love is always stronger than fear. And together in community, we embody that and bring that alive for one another and a world that is aching and in need of that. Go forth into this week, bringing alive the very best that is in each and every one of you until we see one another again, hopefully later this week for our Christmas Eve services, in person, streaming, or on demand. Go in peace, go in love.